it's Casey. So as you probably see, again, I'm going to be talking about, what to do to find a job when you come to Taiwan or before coming to Taiwan. So in this video, I'm going to talk specifically about locations in Taiwan based on my own experience and also race. As you know, I'm Asian American, so I'm going to talk a little bit about ethnicity and race and all these kind of things. So again, this is all based on personally just my experience. So let's get straight into it. So regarding location, I know everybody in the world wants to stay in Taipei for good reason, right? Highly convenient. There's the MRT or metro, whatever you want to call it. So there's no need for you to get a scooter license or a driving license, things like that. So it is far more convenient in terms of public transportation. There's the bus, things like this. I heard Taichung is relatively decent when it comes to public transportation with their bus systems. But typically when you live in other places, transportation or public transportation is rather slow, especially in Shinju. Buses take maybe an hour sometimes or more to get on there, and also it's very crowded, so typically people will ride a scooter like myself. So that's something to consider. However, obviously when it comes to Taipei, it's far more competitive, so keep that in mind. So this, whether or not you like it, here's the issue about race is, personally as an Asian American or specifically Taiwanese American, it could be a rather tricky situation. And I'm kind of unhappy about it too. So I'm just going to talk briefly about when I did kind of look into the market in Taipei when I first moved here for just like a couple of weeks. Basically, my cousin took me around to like Bushijie, which is like the cram school areas, to kind of tell me about some places. And first of all, I will mention, true, I did not start with any teaching experience. However, I graduated from a pretty good college in America. I was clearly a native speaker. They typically look for accents sometimes, so I have an American accent, as you can tell. Just things like this. And what was sad about it was, despite the person seeing my resume and hearing me speak, they straight up told me that I was Asian and that they wouldn't hire me because students want white teachers, no matter where they come from, even if they were from non-English speaking countries, or rather English wasn't their native language, and you guys know what that is. And granted, this specific cram school, I later found out, was not a very good, reputable cram school, because oftentimes they even hire, teachers who were Caucasian but had no college degree or anything like that. They had heavy accents. They didn't even know anything about grammar or things like that. So to me, that was a little bit hurtful when I first moved here. It was my first experience, ironically, of sort of like this backwards racism or something. I guess I don't really know what to call it, but they told me that students wanted a Caucasian teacher, despite their education or things like that, or accents and all these kind of things. And I can kind of agree. I have heard in some cases, or where people may have questioned me in my reputation and things like this, just because I was Asian looking. But so one thing to keep in mind for us Asian Americans or Asian Canadians, whatever have you, is we may need to work harder. And even for other ethnicities who are unfortunately not Caucasian looking, may have to work harder, because working harder typically means having certificates, or getting different experiences with different tests, being capable of teaching, testing, or different kinds of tests such as TOEFL or IELTS or SATs or GRE, etc. We have to be able to have those on hand, and as we should. But if you want a, arguably it's faster to find a job, um, just to teach conversation or something for some cram schools, especially in Taipei. Being Caucasian, I'm sorry, is a huge advantage because it's the look, it's exotic, it sells. And do I agree with it? Again, probably not a lot, but this is the culture that people have to overcome. And I've heard it could be a little bit similar when it comes to working in other Asian countries as well, be it Korea or be it Japan, whatever have you. Um, so honestly, I think that's why they look for that picture on your resume. So we just have to work harder and we have to believe in ourselves and also find that place that appreciates teachers for their quality instead of just their outward appearance. So there's still a lot to overcome in the world. I won't really talk about that, but as an Asian American, yes, I did face shockingly for my first time about that. So but even in Taipei, whether you're Caucasian or not, they have much higher standards there, obviously, because, it's more competitive. So they'll look for people who have specific backgrounds in teaching certificates, or they majored in education, things like this. But if you're just starting out with no experience like myself, I moved here when 2014, so I was around like 23 or 24, rather young. So first of all, I didn't talk about my age. I tried to pretend I was a little bit more mature just based on what I was told because I won't say for all, but I do think for some individuals, some students, they may feel like they don't feel comfortable with someone younger than them teaching. So, or mentoring or whatever it is. So sometimes we're told not to talk about our age. Now, secondly is if you don't have experience, you may want to consider to go outside of Taipei, especially if you are unfortunately not Caucasian. So again, going to a different city, I think it's actually great. I really appreciate living in Hsinchu because I already feel it's crowded enough. I'm not a person who enjoys crowds and the nightlife, so I actually like the quieter lifestyle of Hsinchu. Granted, I do have to ride a scooter and transportation isn't easy, but in another aspect is it's actually kind of fun to ride a scooter, as a lot of foreigners will ride their scooters all around the whole island and things like that. And it's very convenient when you travel to different cities for fun. So that's something to consider is if you don't have a lot of teaching experience, working in different cities will give you a higher chance compared to Taipei. Now, other things I want to mention. Yes, definitely certificates. Now, I get asked this a lot is, do you need like teaching certificates or what have you? In Taipei, probably. Some places, of course, you will find they don't need it, but it will help extremely, right? But when it comes to places where you're just starting out, a lot of places don't necessarily need them, and you don't necessarily need to major in English as well. In fact, a lot of teachers sometimes were formerly engineers or formerly psychologists or business majors. You have a huge plethora or a huge base of different majors, and in some cases that works to your advantage. Some hiring or some companies will actually look for different kinds of majors to teach their different kinds of students. Specifically, adults will, or craft schools that teach adults will cater more to having similar majors or backgrounds, things like that for their lessons. Last few things I want to mention is regarding the students' attitudes towards ethnicity or race. To me, it was rather shocking because, as you guys know, I come from California, so race was never a huge issue for me. There's quite a lot of diversity in the Bay Area, I feel, and yes, sometimes I do hear students making comments that are rather eyebrow raising when I hear them make comments about specific races, as you can imagine. And I take it as an opportunity to hopefully enlighten them on racial issues. And so that's one thing I take very seriously, and I'm proud of trying to impart on my students that race and how it's important to be encompassing of different races and things like this. Now, there are certain cases where I have unfortunately and very sadly heard some cram schools will not hire specific races. And to me, that was, jaw dropping when I first heard about this. Didn't matter what their background was, didn't matter where they came from, things like this. So do be prepared to realize and accept initially that Taiwan doesn't have a ton of diversity. So since they don't have that diversity, they're not exposed to the issues. They learn purely or mostly from media. And you guys know how toxic media can be sometimes when they portray different races. So I think we have to take it upon ourselves as teachers to really enlighten students about diversity and things like this, things that we should care about in our modern and progressive society. So just keep that in mind. Be prepared to sometimes occasionally see some or hear some shocking things that we're not used to when it comes to race and all these kind of things, but take it as an opportunity to hopefully change someone's life and to change their opinion about something and to be more sensitive to these kind of topics. So I don't want to keep this video to be too long. In my next video, I'll talk about salaries and contracts and teaching children versus adults. So as usual, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye guys.